Justice occupies an important role in public discourse. Social movements fight for it, politicians promise it, police say they enforce it, and judges and courts claim to embody it. Yet, in an age of intense polarization, stark divisions have emerged over exactly what justice looks like and how to enact it. So, what is justice after all? And what do anarchists have to say about it? Justice is a fundamental ethical, philosophical, and political concept that shapes our lives in countless ways every single day. The decisions we make are influenced by our own inner sense of right and wrong, society's expectations, and the implicit threat of punishment. Children navigate justice on the playground and when they're disciplined by their parents. These experiences shape their conceptions of what they think is fair. Individual and collective ideas around justice end up defining how we think society should work. Throughout history, human societies have developed their own interpretations of justice, often with the goal of consolidating power. The Code of Hammurabi in ancient Mesopotamia emphasized commensurate punishment, based on the principle of an eye for an eye. In ancient Greece, Socrates went from giving public lectures about justice and its essential role in maintaining public order to being put on trial and executed for corrupting the minds of the youth. Organized religions have mobilized notions of divine justice to enforce strict adherence to tradition, dogma, and establish social hierarchies. Countless atrocities and acts of violence have been sanctified by religious decrees, edicts, fatwas, and doctrines. Religious wars of conquest have imposed ideologies on local populations, replacing indigenous forms of justice rooted in communal equilibrium with grand unifying myths of salvation, damnation, and submission. As European standards of justice evolved from witch trials and brutal acts of public torture to modern legal systems with judges, jurors, and courts, these features became standardized and incorporated into colonial legal frameworks in Africa, Asia, and the so-called New World. What we refer to as justice systems are formalized networks of power relations designed to serve the interests of a society's ruling class, but regulated in part by its local customs, culture, and political institutions. Today, the so-called justice system of capitalist society is characterized by the principles of individual rights, due process, and the sanctity of private property. It's a system whereby laws, police, courts, and prisons exist to enforce social control in the interest of capitalist economics. Anarchists see states, capitalism, and their internal hierarchies such as race, caste, and gender as sources of injustice because they create inequalities, institutionalize exploitation, and restrict individual and collective freedoms. Most anarchist conceptions of justice involve fighting against these oppressive systems and building resilient, autonomous communities in their place, anchored by principles of solidarity, equity, and mutual aid. Any formalized system of justice aims to regulate behavior in accordance with the values of a given community or society. This necessarily entails addressing and discouraging behavior that contravenes or threatens these shared values. To do this, states employ a disciplinary process known as criminalization, through which certain acts are designated as crimes, and the perpetrators of those acts as criminals. From the moment of an individual's arrest to their trial and potential incarceration, the state assumes control and responsibility for investigating, judging, and punishing crimes. Punishment has proven itself over and over as an ineffective tool for reducing violence. On the contrary, it tends to reinforce systematic oppression and increase violence against targeted groups. On top of that, it fails to help perpetrators of violence understand how their actions affect others. Instead of encouraging people to change their behavior willingly, punishment fosters resentment. Many individuals simply refocus their violent actions where they know they won't be caught, often leading to increased rates and severity of domestic or intimate partner violence. The carceral logic of punishment represses certain actions, or entire black market industries, forcing them out of the public spotlight. However, it does nothing to address the underlying root causes of what states deem antisocial behavior, and and in many cases simply creates new opportunities for gangs, cartels, and other organized enterprises built to compete in the violent, unregulated markets created by state decree. While the law claims to treat everyone equally, its application is used to disproportionately criminalize certain groups over others, based on the operation of power in a given society. In some states, it may target certain religious or ethnic minorities. In others, it may be women or queers. In settler colonial societies founded on slavery and genocide, it's Black and Indigenous people. Those who find themselves subjected to a state's justice system face the traumatic experience of being violently cut off from society, then struggling to reintegrate. While most states cite rehabilitation as a primary goal of the criminal justice system, the reality is that processes of criminalization and incarceration primarily serve to perpetuate cycles of poverty, mental illness, and horizontal violence, creating a hyper-marginalized and disposable stratum of the population. Disproportionate criminalization among targeted communities doesn't just affect those who are incarcerated. It disrupts families and community relationships for generations. Prisons, often portrayed as housing dangerous antisocial monsters, predominantly house poor, traumatized individuals. So-called correctional officers subject these prisoners to further trauma, trapping them in toxic, overcrowded environments governed by strict hierarchies of gendered violence. These institutions do produce monsters on either side of the bars. Even so, the capacity of prisoners to harm society is relatively minuscule when compared to the actions of CEOs, bankers, and politicians whose decisions affect the lives of millions. Anarchists reject the state's framework of criminalization and the police and prisons that underpin it. Yet in a world where trauma, alienation, and poverty are widespread, people all too often hurt each other. A world without prisons or police doesn't mean a world where harm isn't confronted and addressed. While anarchists hold a diversity of views on how best to do this, most solutions emphasize popular organizing of community defense and a community-based method of navigating conflict, identifying root causes of violence, and addressing them in a participatory framework. In some circles, this process is known as transformative justice. Transformative justice, as an alternative to state-imposed justice, aims to facilitate understanding between different parties of a conflict, encouraging them to directly participate in their own healing and in determining what a just resolution looks like in a given situation. Often, it will look at what needs people were trying to address when they engaged in harmful behavior, and will try to seek out healthier solutions or outlets to this problem. Interpersonal violence is often conditioned by personal and collective histories of trauma. It is passed down across generations and shaped by our relationship to systems of exploitation and oppression, such as capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. Without discounting individual accountability, it's essential to recognize the ways in which the culture we're all soaked in feeds our tendency to harm one another. Properly coming to terms with this reality involves practicing self-accountability above all else. No one is above hurting others. In our alienated, hyper-atomized societies, the demands of capitalism and the constant burnout it imposes on our bodies often leave us without the time or energy needed to fully engage in transformative processes of healing and repair. Our communities often lack the ability or collective will to deal with severe trauma and mental illness effectively. To make matters worse, many of us did not grow up learning the values of navigating conflict and practicing empathy. Trusting state institutions to handle our conflicts for us has deprived our communities of vital conflict resolution skills, filled us with an antisocial thirst for punishment. Rather than putting in the work to try and resolve conflict, we all too frequently opt for the ease and impersonal nature of social media and a voyeuristic call-out culture that further alienates our interactions and undermines our interests in building meaningful relationships. In the absence of strong communal bonds or kinship ties, there's often little incentive for people to participate in transformative justice processes or to take accountability for their actions. Public call-outs are a tacit admission of this, and in practice, they often serve as little more than warnings for other members of an extended friend group, social network, or scene to avoid a particularly violent or abusive individual. Building capacity for transformative justice would entail helping communities resolve interpersonal conflict amongst themselves, thereby avoiding dynamics of exclusion and punishment that echo those of the state. When revolutionary movements manage to carve out territories of autonomy from the stakes are raised. Security and safety are essential cornerstones of justice, and pushing the police or army out of a given territory creates a vacuum in which insecurity and injustice can flourish. If a revolutionary movement is unable or unwilling to fill this vacuum, they create path to power for whoever can. This is a costly and often repeated lesson of history, from the Spanish Civil War, where Stalinists rebuilt the Republican police forces and used them to smother the revolution from within, to war-torn Afghanistan, where the Taliban slowly reconsolidated their power by using their strict interpretation of Sharia law to settle local disputes in areas effectively abandoned by the state. Fighting for a new society means constructing and fostering alternatives in the here and now that can spread as we build our collective power. Far too often, an inability to constructively navigate conflict and to take care of one another's needs has been the ruin of radical collectives and social movements. So long as we're living in an unjust world, any pursuit of justice will entail some level of discomfort, pain, and distress. Developing and popularizing anarchist conceptions of justice will mean breaking habits, taking risks, practicing and critically experimenting wherever we can. If we desire a world without prisons and the police, we'll need to build it together.